opportunities to individuals on a wide range of topics to address real world challenges. So this is the introduction of Women Institute of Learning and Leadership. Now, I would like to introduce Honorable Dr. Nushaba Hassan, who is the chairperson of WELL. Dr. Nushaba Hassan is founding chairman of Women Institute of Learning and Leadership, WELL. She graduated with MBBS from Dow International Medical University, Karachi, Pakistan in 1988. She earned her specialization degree in medical and color Doppler ultrasound. She further studied from Thomas Jefferson University, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, USA, and earned a diploma with highest merit in her batch. She is also an esteemed member board of trustees of University of Management and Technology, Lahore, and ILM Trust. So now I would like to introduce the webinar, which is based on what exactly we're going to talk in the webinar, so that everybody has an idea from where we're coming from. So over thousands of years, many women have left a mark on their societies, changing the course of history at times and influencing small but significant spheres of life at others. Muslim women participated with men in constructing Islamic culture and civilization, excelling in poetry, literature, and arts. In addition, Muslim women have demonstrated tangible contributions in mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and in the profession of healthcare. Their inspiring stories, charismatic personalities, and determination to contribute to the development of their education is the key to women participation in innovation in science and technology is to help with the change. The webinar is a tribute to the brilliant, outstanding, talented Muslim women in historical context. The webinar will highlight incredible scientific work and their inspiring life story and its struggles. Women Institute of Learning and Leadership, in collaboration with the University of Management and Technology, brings you an insightful learning opportunity. So this webinar, which is titled as Women of Science, Technology, and Leadership in Muslim Civilization. So I would like to introduce our esteemed guest, Professor Salim T.S. Al-Hassani. Assalamu alaikum, sir. Salim Al-Hassani, sir.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
So we'd like to have you here. So I just want to give a small introduction of the guest, which we have here. So Salim T.S. Al-Hassani is president of Foundation of Science, Technology, and Civilization UK, and emeritus professor of mechanical engineering and honorary professor fellow in humanities at University of Manchester. He was awarded a fellowship of the British Science Association for his work on the promotion of science within Muslim culture. He has published numerous papers in international journals and books. He is editor of the book 1001 Inventions. The enduring legacy of Muslim civilization received numerous awards, international awards, and was repeatedly mentioned amongst the world's most influential 500 Muslims in the category of science and technology UK. So welcome here, sir. Well Institute welcome you here. Can you just say a few words so that we can get started after that?
Okay, good morning and salam alaikum. Thank you very much. I hope all goes well for the next hour. I like to obviously express gratitude and thanks to the invitation, in particular for Dr. Noshaba Murad and for her Institute for Women in Leadership and Learning. What I would like to do is to switch on to my slideshow so that we can get on with the work. I may have some teething problem to do this, so I'm going to do a screen share now, and hopefully it will work. Now, I might be having some problems here. Are we okay?
Yes. Um, Salim, so
Am I
we can,
sharing? Am I
yes,
sharing the
yes,
screen?
we can see your slides. You can please, sir, please
Okay,
proceed.
good. All clear. Okay, then. What the title is obviously with you. The word women, of course, is very popular nowadays, particularly in the UK. There's all sorts of discussions about the women's role amongst the Muslim community. However, the subject of women is so important around the whole world, in every country. There is an issue of equality and gender and all this. And I really don't want to intend in this lecture to enter into religious or political or socio-political discussion. What I'd like to do is to just go into my own recent journey into this subject. It's quite new to me because my interest has, for the last 20 years or so, was in the history of science and technology, in particular, the history of those fields in Muslim civilization. So let's just get on with the subject. I think that what prompted me to be interested even more strongly on the subject of women is to see the lack of knowledge. It's quite meager about Muslim women's role particularly in the Muslim civilization. So I looked recently at a recent book. Well, it's only 6 years ago, famous, quite popular. It's called Fantastically Great Women Who Changed the World, authored by Kate Pankhurst. And she lists those women. None of them actually includes Muslim. And it doesn't include non-Europeans, actually, for that matter. So this is really very very interesting. I was particularly disturbed because I thought that there were quite a number of women who contributed to the improvement of the quality of life in the world. So let me just sort of, so this is a book. She has a timeline that brings it's not only about the women that she speaks of today or even in the last century. She brought a whole timeline of history of showing women. And you could see, I don't know whether you can actually see, this is a 400 CE. That means just the year 400, having Hypatia here of Alexandria. She was famous in her interest in mathematics and so on. And then there is a huge jump to the year 1678. When she starts bringing in women and particularly European or Western women. Now this is very strange. There's a huge gap of 1200 years here of missing information. Now, of course, if you go to Google like I did and write women in science, you'll find that the same problem. I mean, we've got mainly those great achievements have been made by women in the subject are Western, white women. Now, I'm startled because this totally ignores the contributions of other civilizations, and in particular, those who contributed in the golden age of Muslim civilization. So that brings me to the subject that is not just a question of women from other cultures and that their contribution. There is a problem with men as well, because when you look at popular books about inventors and history of science and technology, like I did some years back, looking at this particular book, which is says scientists and inventors. It looks at the people who made technology from the earliest times to the present day. Now, of course, you'd expect, this is really fascinating. It's a coffee table book. The size is large and full of pictures. What it has is that it has every 2 pages are devoted to an inventor from the beginning of times, so that you have the name, some sketches, and his or her contribution. In fact, saying her, there is not a single lady in this whole timeline, whole book. So let's look at what we have here. We turn pages, and you get to page 14, which starts with Archimedes. And as you see here, the time of Archimedes is 287, from 212 BC to 208. Now, this time is important because it's quite a distance back in history. When you go to the next page, which is page 16 and 17, because the other one was 14, 15, this is 16 and 17, and you get Johannes Gutenberg. And you can see the time. I don't know whether you can actually see it. I'll try to enlarge it for you. It's 1400 to 1400. Now, this is incredible, a huge leap. Not a single person is mentioned there. And of course, we call that the sometime, and then they go to Leonardo da Vinci. You have the year 1452. And then, of course, in summary, you can actually put a graph of a timeline showing contributions of various scientists and inventors from the whole world out of this book. In fact, it is also applicable to most of the curriculum in schools and early university years in the subjects of science, medicine, chemistry, and biology, engineering, mathematics. And so you actually could summarize this whole law by drawing a graph like I have here showing you. Science and technology are taught by many education systems. And this includes where you are in Pakistan. You go and look at your books. When you actually look at the physics book and you start picking up names from the first page all the way to the end, you will find that they're mainly starting from the Greek, and then you end up with a big gap to the Renaissance in Europe, and then the Industrial Revolution, and then our modern time. So this is an issue, because we call that the Dark Ages. The sort of we call it. I don't call it, but many people do call that. Well, that means there was nothing happening effectively in the world in that time, and that was actually true, perhaps, for Europe, although some people dispute that, because when you include Muslim Spain, the Andalus in there, then you will find that it was actually Europe was quite bright. It wasn't that dark after all. Let us look at, if we were to fill this gap with knowledge about what the rest have done, like what the Persians have done, the Chinese, the Indian, and so on, and include the Muslims, you'll find that this gap in history disappears. Actually, knowledge in science, technology, in medicine, leadership, and so on, it's all continuous and it accumulates. People do benefit from the experience of their predecessors. And hence, humanity as a whole can claim and celebrate their progress, rather than being exclusive only to Europe. And then you'll find that in Europe, there was a big dank period. But in fact, when you come to focus carefully about Europe, you'll find that there is a period in here which is called Al-Andalus period. And that's almost filling in that gap. It's just incredible, of 7 centuries, more than 7 centuries, of the Muslim civilization predominant in the Iberian Peninsula, named at the time by Al-Andalus, has been ignored. So this is really a great pity. So this amnesia, therefore, is not just valid for women, it seems that it is valid for men. Now, I tried to accumulate in one slide about 600 names of, you can't read them. You just find you find white names, and there are different colors of showing the Christian, Hindu, and so on. So you'll find that, sorry, let me go back to, right. This slide, I can give you the names in detail and the details about each name, but actually shows you there are a huge number. I mean, there's about 600 of names that are missing, and they really should be in that gap to be recognized. In fact, some of them, if you use the rules of Nobel laureates and the Fellowship of the Royal Society, they will quite easily fit there. So let's move on. And of course, that included not only men, it included women, and it included different faiths and non-faiths who lived in that period of Muslim civilization. Now, is this a question? Is it ignorance or is it deliberate? The problem is, if you go to the conspiracy theory and you go to political extremism and so on, and you just say, well, this is really deliberate. But I must say that we should not be too extreme, because there is an enormous amount of ignorance that actually exists in the knowledge because of lack of knowledge. There are, today, I have asked experts in manuscripts, in libraries and so on, in Arabic manuscripts, which records the history of science and technology, medicine, and Muslim civilization. There are, at the moment, survived after wars and burning. I mean, some people say there were more than 1 million manuscripts was burnt in Spain when Muslims and Jews were evicted at the end of the Muslim Andalusian period. And of course, when the Mongols attacked and ransacked Baghdad, we were told that the amount of manuscripts that have been burned, that have been thrown in the sea, in the river Tigris, made the water look black. Anyway, what we have today, we are told that there are between 5 and 8 million survived manuscripts. Why I say 5 and 8? Because a lot of them are repeated in one way or another. The issue is that there is only 50,000, around 50,000 that are edited. Now imagine the amount of manuscripts that we are not aware of what's inside them, or we have not read them because they're not edited properly. And there's an enormous amount for universities and for people who are interested in the history to bring out this. The problem also is further made worse, is that then this 50,000, because they are all sponsored, when you go and do an editing of a manuscript, it's a sponsorship. You find somebody, a philanthropist or a government or a rich man or a leader, they will sponsor the editing of a manuscript. And then, of course, it will then, when you apply for a grant nowadays, you have to satisfy the grantee, the grant sponsor. And they normally decide which area they sponsor. So in those, if you look at the 50,000 manuscripts, predominantly they are about dynasties, they are about religious discussion and debates between various schools of thought, and Maliki, Hanbali, Shafi'i, and so on. And then you have also an interest in literature, particularly in poetry. And then you go into, you find, if you look carefully, you will find here and there some manuscripts about science, technology, medicine, and so on, and architecture. So this is really the problem of ignorance. So therefore, I wouldn't want to totally accuse deliberate colonial and so on. However, when you look at the present day recognition you are forced to think that there must be some sort of deliberate effort to hide the fact. There is an interesting list of geological features on Venus. Now, Venus, of course, has got many craters and so on. And the United Nations, and with the help of NASA and so on, they have decided, because Venus is a feminine name, they have decided to put names of unrecognized names of great women from the world. And they included the Greek names, Persian, Buddhist, Hindu, but only one Arab name, one Arab woman. And you know what? It's pre-Islamic goddess of the name of Allat. You know, many of you Muslims who study history and about Islam, that Islam came to effectively eliminate the belief in statues and believe in such diets and so on. And Allat was an Arab goddess, right? This is really a great insult to pick up this name and celebrate her. She was not even real, to celebrate her as representing the Arab and Muslim side. This is incredible. This is why one feels blood boiling, because, you know, how can you, not excuse those people who accuse that there is a deliberate. So I don't really want to enter into this, because, you know, we don't want to get into politics and to religious arguments. But there we are. We have an issue. Now, of course, why is this so important? Because it's all to do with perception. Now, when you say about Muslim women, when you look at this picture, yeah, you'll say this is Muslim women, because they wear the burqa, they cover themselves all the way down, and including from the childhood and so on. Yeah, so that's the problem of perception. But can we just go and look at what perception, tells us? You can err, because these ladies and that child, they are from the Haredi Jewish sect. They're Jews. They're not Muslim. And so it's incredible how much perception and how we get brainwashed, and you get stereotypes ingrained in people's mind, so that you begin to communicate with the rest of the world with that sort of perception. And so we really need to re-perceive. And so when I first came across this idea of women in science and so on, I was reading Al-Biruni, and then come across something very interesting. Al-Biruni, of course, is an incredible scientist, scholar, and so on. He has written something like 200 books. He is from not far away from your university originally, in Pakistan, Afghanistan, borders of India. And so he really should be celebrated by Pakistan, and he should be taught. He has a fascinating life, and he can be taken as a role model in terms of his attitude to environment, attitude to humanity, and so on. Anyway, so I don't know whether I have actually, have I been?
No, we can hear you now.
Sorry?
We can hear you now.
Oh, you didn't hear me before?
No, I said we are hearing you now.
Now, did you hear me before?
And there was a slight pause.
Oh, there was a pause. Okay.
Yeah, and after that, it's fine.
Right. Okay, thank you. Now, of course, Al-Biruni would mention the name of Rihanna as being a very important person in his own work, whether it is an actual hands-on. There was another lady, Rihanna, who sponsored a lot of his work, but I think in that particular instant in his books, he was referring to another Rihanna who has helped in his work. Now, if you look at, I was trying to find out who said that the Earth was spherical amongst Muslim scholars. Then I came across the name of Ibn Hazm. Now, Ibn Hazm, he was from the Al-Andalus and the 10th century. Now, he is known to be a religious scholar, but yet he has a famous sentence, which he says, the earth is spherical, despite what others believe. And that is really stalking, because many people of his time used to say the earth was flat. Anyway, but the interesting thing about his life, he is considered to be actually one of the most significant theological Islamic scholar in the early history of Islam. He had 400 works, and only 40 of them still survive, because a lot of them were burnt by the Christian Inquisition. Anyway, he was, in jurisprudence and history and in comparative religion, but he was mostly taught by women. He mentioned some of them, but there was something in the region of, about 60 women who contributed to his education. Now, this is really a fascinating story. That's Ibn Hazm. He has influenced many scholars after him. Then you come to the role of women in teaching and producing scholars. Now, I'm bringing quotations from men who are famous in Islamic theology. Now, Imam Ibn Kathir is known to all Muslims who try to find out the meaning of the Quran in Arabic, because he has one of the earliest tafsir, the commentaries of the Quran. And this is his handwriting that you see there, right? And in it he says that he has listened. He was mentioning he's listening to the reading of Al-Muwatta, which is a famous hadith book, a famous book of narrations of the sayings of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And he says he has listened to it from Sheikha, meaning a scholarly lady by the name of Zainab bint Kamal bint al-Kamil al-Maqdisiyya, meaning from Jerusalem, Maqdis, and Damascus, who lived in Damascus at Dimashqiyya, in the Hanbali Hanabila mosque in Mount Kasyon in Damascus. Now, these are incredible references for women who have taught men and contributed to their great education. There's a slide here that I picked up from one of the manuscripts, which is interesting. It shows a woman sitting on a minbar, like a pulpit there, and we have men and women, listening to her. So, in terms of preaching, then I came across to a fantastic book written by Muhammad Akram Nadwi. He has written a book, first in Arabic, something like 40 volumes, looking at women, of those women who narrated sayings of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Now, this is very important, because this is effectively in Islam, the sources of knowledge are from the Quran and from the hadith of the sayings of the Prophet. So you get something in the region of 8,000 of them spread around the world. They were like sort of traveling. I show this map because it shows that these women, they had resonated with the call of Islam for education. They went out and traveling from city to city, from Arabia to Syria, North Africa, Andalusia, all the way up to China, educating, teaching, narrating in this is the inner sanctum of Islam. This is theology, although the word theology may not quite describe that. But can you imagine taking hadith, taking a narration from a lady? That means, and from any person, that means you have to trust their emotion, you have to trust their honesty and their trustworthiness, you have to trust their education, and you have to, this is incredible conditions to actually accept a saying, to accept a hadith or a saying of the Prophet coming through the chain and there you have here now this research, some of it has been done in English when Muhammad Akram Nadawi was in Oxford University, and there is a book which summarizes that, although the original Arabic is really a fantastic encyclopedia of what is called Al-Muhaddithat, the Muslim narrators, the Muslim scholars in Islam by Sheikh Muhammad. So I'm not going to go too much into this, but we can summarize that women, I have begun to discover this, and I thought I'd share this with you and the rest of the people, because women actually participated in education and training. This is probably one of their main expertise, because what I discovered is that the real secret, if you like, the secret weapon of Muslim civilization was not men. Men were just on the front line. It was women. They were the ones who have actually held the society together, and they have propagated Islam everywhere. This is incredible. Had it not been for the contribution of women who produced young men and women in a manner to resonate with the objectives of Muslim civilization, to improve the quality of life, you see that their attitude was that those who believers, Iman, has to be manifested and testified and shown by amal al-salih, by useful work. And the useful work meant that if you are a believer, you have to contribute to improving the quality of life in society. That was really incredible. And you could see them everywhere. This was what they did. But then, but beside that, even that, on top of that, you find them in agriculture. You find them in the textile industry. And you also find them in science and medicine, even more in management and administration. I like to give you a word. Most of you might have heard the word haram, the harem. Now, when I used to hear about this, because I was brought up mainly in the UK, it comes to my mind women, particularly of the sultans, of the Ottoman sultans, who lived somewhere and in the palace, and they get cherry-picked to go and sleep with the sultan because they're all wives and concubines and so on. And such a disastrous, erroneous knowledge. Because if you go and dig deep into the harem, you find that when you want to go in the harem, as a man, you have to take your shoes off and wear what they call these wooden sandals, the one that makes noise when you walk. And you walk into this harem on marble so that you cannot go silently. You will make noise, and women inside it will know there is a man walking. And so because they don't wear their hijab and scarf and so on when they are by themselves, so they start covering themselves when there is a male passing through. This is the secret of these wooden, click, clock, these are called in Arabic, they're called qubqab. I don't know what they're called in English at the moment, it doesn't help my mind. But they are sandals, but they are made out of thick wood, which makes noise on the floor. Now, what is inside this harem? Inside this harem is the inner government of management and administration. You find these women, they are recording, they are writing, they are translating. They are, the statistics, you find some of the statistics they do. I came across statistics about how many eggs in a farm, produced by a farm in Morocco. They are in Istanbul. So, this huge empire, which was, feeding a huge number of, soldiers and so on. They were inside, behind the scene. There were these ladies who are writing ciphers, deciphers, writing messages and so on, and running projects. And, it really is just a huge, huge knowledge. I was so pleased to hear about that. So harem is not what is in our mind and in perception. One needs to have another idea. In fact, there's such a terrible attitude about women and the concubine and so on and so on. I came across a terrible story when I was a kid, that Harun al-Rashid, who was the most famous caliph, who used to say to the sun, go to the cloud, go and rain anywhere in the world, the crop, the resulting crop that come from you will be taxed by me. So effectively, he was ruling the world at the time. And so for some reason, there was a lot of animosity by the Crusaders and the enemies and so on. And there were a lot of rumors against him. And one of the rumors is that he had so many women that when he wants to climb up the stairs, he would put 2 rows of women standing on either side of the stairs so that he can hold the bust of each of them when he climbs up. What a terrible insult and what a terrible story. This is really bad. But of course, one needs to concentrate on scholarship. Management and administration was an incredible function besides the education and training, besides the agriculture, the industry, the technology, science, medicine, and so on. Let's now have an artist impression of how women must have been, particularly at the time of the golden age. You find that they were involved in astronomy and in geography, in mathematics, and so on. So I'd like to concentrate very quickly. The problem is time, because there's so many of them. I mean, there really is a whole sea of knowledge. There are those women that I'll come across. I shall start with Zubaydah, but then, of course, there is the companion of the Prophet, peace be upon him, Al-Shifa bint Abdullah, who was a very famous lady. Then Maryam al-Ajliya in the 10th century, Sutayt al-Mahamli of Baghdad in the 10th century, and then Fatima al-Fihriya on the 9th century in Fez, Morocco. Let's just get on to Zubaydah. Zubaydah bint al-Mansur, she was the wife of Harun al-Rashid. She was born in 766 in Mosul, but she died in 831 in Baghdad. This mausoleum here is actually mistakenly called in Baghdad, this is the Zubaydah's tomb, but it is not her tomb. This is Zumurrud Khatun's, she is buried there. And there are other respectable ladies buried there over there. But Zubaydah is famed of doing all sorts of things, but she was an incredible lady in terms of management and in terms of donating and in philanthropic work. You see this Baghdad here, and there is Mecca and Medina over there. There is a road. This road is called Darb Zubaydah. That means the highway of Zubaydah. This was the Hajj, the pilgrim route between Mecca and Kufa and Baghdad. It was there at the time of, early, before even Islam, but it was in a terrible state. And early in the time of the Umayyads, some, caliphs tried to repair it and so on. But the contribution of Zubaydah is phenomenal because she made pilgrimage many times. The history says that she even went by foot with her husband, Harun al-Rashid, the caliph, all the way down, even through the desert. However, we call in our motorways, we call service stations. She has introduced hundreds of service stations, and this sort of, you can't see this is faint, but here you have the stations in here on the road, and when I can't go into details, but there's an interesting story about the project. The finance people came to her and they said that it's costing us an enormous amount of money. She says, I don't care, even if the cost of each strike of an axe to repair the road and to introduce lakes and dining hotels and so on, even if it cost 1 dinar, it's a lot of money for each structure. When she finished this project, particularly the one that was in Mecca, she was presented with the account books when she was in Baghdad, this huge number of papers and so on. She took them and she said, this is not the time of accounts. We will get our accounts in the day of judgment when we die, when we meet our Lord, when we meet our Creator. And she threw all the books into River Tigris. Now, of course, there's no time to look at this, but there are pictures of her projects. There are pictures of the road, there are pictures of, you know, of the projects themselves. There are lakes, the reservoirs. Some of them are square, some of them are round. There are sort of hotel-like. But the most incredible project is to bring water into Mecca from outside Mecca, from near Al-Taif, Taif and so on. The water to be brought from aquifers, from underneath, from high places, hidden water in below the ground. And she would bring the water alongside aqueducts all the way to Mecca. And if you go to Mecca now, you can ask, can you show me, can you take me to, they call it Naba' Zubaydah, or the spring of Zubaydah. Really, my mind boggles when I see this. The instructions, the amount of work she's done is beyond description. This lady is you know, she was phenomenal. And you know, in terms of management, leadership, sponsorship, and even also in her knowledge and her she was, of course, we don't want to talk about her influence in politics, because she was very influential in the Abbasid period at the time of Harun Rashid, her husband. Now, let's move on quickly to the next one. I would bring in here Fatima al-Fihriya, who was a young lady of the age of 23 at the time in 859. That's a long time ago. And she was in Fez. Originally, she was from Al-Qayrawan, but her community in Fez in Morocco, they were called Al-Qayrawaniyin. But then later, the mosque that she built, when she received a huge amount of donation, she built an educational mosque. And her sister, her only other sister, she built a mosque nearby called Al-Andalus Mosque. However, Fatima al-Fihriya built this mosque as an educational, attached to it, a school, is that. But then this immediately became a university, and it's called the University of Al-Qarawiyyin. It still functions until today. It is considered to be the earliest university that still is active until today. It started teaching not only Arabic and religious knowledge, but also incorporated other natural topics and so on. And the earliest PhDs come there. You know, people say the word chair for a professor comes from there because it means kursi. The person who sits on the chair is either a sheikh or a chairman called ustad. Kursi comes from there. It really is a huge contribution that she did. This university still exists there, and one can go and visit it, and it's functioning in the city of Fez. Now, let's move on to sort of engineering, technology, and in particular instruments. What you see there is instruments that to actually monitor the movement of stars, to tell you time, tell you where you are, and so on. The most famous one of them, the well-known, is called astrolabe. Now, to make an astrolabe is a huge sort of effort, because one needs to watch the mapping of the movement of the stars and plot them on the flat, because you have a sphere, sky, hemispherical sky ahead of you. You watch some famous stars, and then you plot those stars by using an instrument on a flat plane, and then the movement of those stars, the trajectories are transferred from that flat plane into instruments. Could be held by hand, or it could be even as large as the one that you see there is hanging on the wall. And by dialing that pointing it to a star, you can actually tell your time, you can tell where you are, and so on. There are many functions and applications of this instrument. Now we come to learn that this young lady called Maryam al-Ajliya from Aleppo, in the year born in 1944, At the time of Saif al-Dawla, she learned the profession from her father and from an instructor as well. And that instructor, I think, was an Australian Christian. She has learned to make astrolabes. And of course, that is not an easy job at all. And we need to recognize this incredible contribution that she made. Not only her who used to use and make astrolabes, there is Fatima al-Majriti, who was the daughter of Maslama al-Majriti in the Al-Andalus in Cordoba in the 10th to 11th century. She became his assistant in astronomy, and they have re-edited the works and astronomical tables of Al-Khwarizmi. Al-Khwarizmi lived in Baghdad, and they were in Al-Andalus, so they had to rework all his tables and make them applicable to the meridian that passes through Cordoba, so that it becomes valid for their country. An incredible amount of work, it really is. The other lady in astronomy who is also come to be known, there is a huge article written by Kenneth Johnson about her. He is interested in astrology, and her name is Boran of Baghdad. And he, of course, the word astrology is linked with astronomy. Again, her life story is very interesting, and I'm not going to get into, but she was the daughter, she was the wife of Al-Ma'mun. Al-Ma'mun was the famous caliph who have effectively built the Al-Hikmah, Dar al-Hikmah in Baghdad. Now, the other lady in Baghdad was Sutaita al-Mahamli. She was not only a faqih, a scholar in religion and knowledge and so on, but she was also a mathematician. She knew hadith, jurisprudence, literature, but she was known to be a mathematician. And to the extent that her knowledge made her become an expert witness in courts, when a judge has a problem in resolving disputes of commercial nature or disputes in assets evaluation or disputes in inheritance, he would call Sutaita, and she would use algebra and mathematics to sort out the problem and show them in the court and how she derives them. Her mathematical work is also available in manuscripts. Now, there is another mathematician, geometrician, and algebraic expert, and so on, in exact sciences. Her name was Lubna. Sometimes they call her Labana or Lubana, but she was Lubna of Cordoba. She was the private secretary of the famous Umayyad Caliph Al-Hakam II. And again, deserves recognition and deserves study. The women in medicine, I have to go very quickly, they spread throughout history. But there were early ones at the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him. Of course, you know, let me just talk about the position of women at the time, the early years of the Prophet. There is a whole book of 4 volumes called Liberation of Women at the time, the initial ages, of the initial period of Risala, means at the time of Muhammad and the first caliphs. This 4-volume describes the women and how they behaved at the time. This is a fantastic, unfortunately only it's in Arabic, it really deserves to be translated into English. Now over there, he describes many, many women, but women were transformed. They resonated, they suddenly became women or leaders, educators, they resonated with the objectives of Islam. And not only as housewives and so on. And this was just that's just an ordinary function, although by itself is a huge duty, but they went beyond that as well. And they went into education, like I've mentioned, in management and so on. But their main was to produce the future generation in such a way that these young men and women, when they are brought up, they're brought up on very strong moral foundation. And their aim is to improve the quality of life and to help to the humanity and so on. So the earliest ladies in medicine, there were ladies called Nusayba bint al-Harith al-Ansari, Asma bint the daughter of Abu Bakr, the Caliph Abu Bakr, and then Zainab bin Yaud, Rufayda al-Aslami. Some of them were, medics. They would set up tents in a war situation. They would go with the army. They would set up tents, and they would nurse and so on. Of particular person that I like to mention here is Al-Shifa bint Abdullah. She was expert in skin disease. The Prophet asked her to teach other women how to do the treatment. But when the time of Umar the Caliph came, he appointed her, because of her excellence in terms of knowledge and management skills, he appointed her as the health and safety executive over Medina market. This new market that the Prophet has established is different than the other markets. He has made special new rules in this market, effectively free market, not control, and so that the prices and so on, and some of the capitalists, they say that Muhammad he set up this market, making history the beginning of capitalism. What they mean by the beginning of independent market. Now, Umar the Caliph has made Al-Shifa the muhtasib, or the watcher, the keeper on the market, so that she would inspect the food, inspect the prices, inspect the structures, and so on, and gave her full authority, not just to report, but to actually execute. And that means that there were also women in the market, and she was accompanied by people who will, even if need be, they will punish the person who is guilty then and there without having to go and do a report. Now, going all the way down to the Ottoman, women's journey in medicine, is a huge story. But in this particular manuscript, there is an interesting picture. What we have here is the main gate it's called the Amasya Dar al-Shifa, and this in Istanbul. And this image shows Sharaf ad-Din Sabanjulu, who was a famous doctor, surgeon. And he was chief physician of Dar al-Shifa, with two of his students. And look at the students. There are two ladies there standing on either of his side. So let's move on away from medicine and look at, oops. I'm having difficulty. I was going to actually, I was supposed to, have we got a problem with the communication?
No, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
Yeah, but I'm having difficulty in my slide to show for some reason.
Oh, okay.
Let me just.
Are we looking at
check.
time also?
Right. Yeah. Now I'm going to run very quickly. Women, when I mentioned that they were in the background of management and administration, they were also in literature and they were in calligraphy. Many of those manuscripts that you see, millions and millions of them, they mostly have been written, and the scribes were women. They were famous ones who had fantastic style, the calligraphy. A lady who's famous called Al-Ghassaniya, and there's also the other lady, Safiya, who were really unsurpassed in calligraphy. They introduced illuminations and golden embroideries and so on those manuscripts. They were also involved in speeches, in oration. In poetry. Then I'll skip this great lady, Hurrem Sultan, famous Sultan wife, Hurrem in the Ottoman Empire, but because she had huge activity in philanthropy. If you look in terms of leadership in Africa, one wouldn't want to miss the Africans. the Queen, Queen Amina of Zaria, I picked her up because she was also involved in engineering, in building fences and some fancy engineering in the area. The other one who also commands interest is this lady called Lala Sahana from Morocco. She actually, she was a very shrewd politician. She saw the threats of the 16th century um, uh, King Charles V. And what she did, she learned, she still knows Spanish very well, but she actually learned Turkish as well. And she went in secret to visit Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent. And she convinced him that he needs to come and save Algeria from the European attack by and sending his army to stop civil war in Morocco and so on. So I there are many. There is Shajarat al-Dur. She was a mother of a queen mother. She was a queen, if you like, called queen or and she became leader. But her fame was that she actually was instrument in defeating the Crusades and captured King Louis of France in Egypt. She was a very successful military leader as well, anyway, and she fell from power in the year in 1256. Not to go very far, I must mention India. So I will be ending up in a minute. Just one second. To mention the name Sultana Razia, she's actually Radiya or Razia. She was the ruler of Delhi between 1236 and 1240. Her story really is incredible because her father picked her up rather than appointing his two sons. He picked her up to become the to become his heir in terms of ruling, and it was really a very strange custom that her father would choose her. His name was Shamsuddin Etatmish, and she had another incredible story. But I would like to end my talk about the slide that women also are found to contribute in sports. And although it's not part of leadership and so on, I picked up this from a manuscript. Some of you might wonder, about Pakistan women. This is Uzbekistan and Pakistan, ancient. They are playing polo on a horseback, golf on a horseback. And if you look closely, there are also not only women, but there are also men. Now, I don't want to get into politics here, but I think that there are some very interesting stories, more than 1,000 years. I mean, you're talking about 1,400 years of history of Muslim civilization. So I like to end here. Thank you for the opportunity. So one needs to bring in awareness to Muslim heritage because it seemed to due to either ignorance or deliberate, this is missing. You can visit the website that I've put out there, muslimheritage.com. There's how1000inventions.com. There's also a new website which brings in medicine in the contribution called 1001cures.net. Thank you so much. I hope it has been an interesting story for you. And I don't know whether we have exceeded the time. I must have. So thank you again. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be.
Walaikum salam. Professor, it was heartening to hear so much about Muslim women and Muslim men, who are completely forgotten in history. Your presentation was so comprehensive that there are no other questions to be asked because you have almost answered all of queries, all of our questions. So therefore, we are going to move ahead. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Noshaba for sharing her thoughts about this webinar. Dr. Shaba, please. Salim sir, could you please unshare your PowerPoint slides?
Say that again.
Could you please unshare your PowerPoint slides?
Stop share.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Hello.
Hello, respected Professor Dr. Salim Al Hassani. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Our most valued audience, ladies and gentlemen. Indeed, it was a pleasure having you in this session today, and highest honor, I'm sure about it. On behalf of the Women Institute of Learning and Leadership, that is WIL, and University of Management and Technology, UMT, I must mention a deep sense of appreciation for Professor Al Hassani for his remarkable work highlighting achievements of Muslim civilization in the fields of science and technology. Today, we are all inspired by your insights to our history, which we must own and take forward. We must all think as to how we can make a mark to our legacy, which continues on and on. Ladies and gentlemen, more than 500 million of the women in the world are Muslim, concentrated in approximately 45 Muslim majority countries, with the largest number in the South Asian subcontinent. In his work, Professor Al Hassani draws attention to the contrasting approach and perspective towards women before and after the message of Islam. Many of the leading Greek philosophers, to the likes of Plato and Aristotle, considered as the pioneers of Western civilization, dehumanized women by regarding them as low level creatures. Here, I must acknowledge that Professor Al Hassani asserted that Islam provided an alternative perspective by empowering women with progressive social, legal, political, and economic rights. In Islam, knowledge is the criteria to judge man's superiority over all other creatures rather than gender. In Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter 2, verse number 30, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala appoints Adam as his vicegerent or Khalifa on earth by teaching him the name of all the things and ordered the angels to prostrate before Adam in recognition of his superior knowledge. In this respect, Islam has always considered knowledge to the key to human salvation and happiness, both in this world and the hereafter. Sorry about that. Our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam encouraged Muslims to seek knowledge even if one has to travel to China. All this highlights the importance Islam places on deepening our understanding of divine power and wisdom. And ladies and gentlemen, because of this attitude, Islamic civilization dominated the world of science and technology for nearly 600 years. In light of this, a long line of female scholars and activists attained high position and great acclaim, both during the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ and afterwards as Islamic civilization was flourishing. For example, the Prophet ﷺ assigned women to important administrative posts, he appointed a woman named Samra binti Nuhayk al-Asadia to the position of Muhtasib, that is market inspector. She continued to keep this position during the time of the first two caliphs, seeing appointment of other women in similar position later on. This example demonstrates how women were actively engaged in leadership positions in public, political, economic, and educational spheres during the early Islamic period. In addition to the contributions of Hazrat Aisha, Rahmatullah alayh, an example of scholarly excellence, Amra Rahmatullah alayh was also considered an authoritative voice on Hadith. Similarly, Aisha bint Saad was another woman learned in Islamic sciences to the point that a number of famous jurists and scholars of Hadith became her pupils. Imam Shafi, for example, studied Hadith in Egypt under Sayyida Nafisa bint al-Hasan ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib. In addition to their contributions to Hadith, women also pioneered the first educational institutions, as Sir you had just mentioned, about Fatma al-Fahri, established the first and the oldest university in the world in Fez, Morocco, in 1859 AD, almost 9th century. And it was a grand college mosque complex in Al-Qaraween. At its height, Al-Qaraween was well equipped with the latest astronomical gadgetry of the time. Healthcare is another domain wherein women have played an active role. Even during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, women would play the role of water bearers and nurses treating the sick and wounded. Rufaidah bint Saad, one of the first people to accept Islam in Medina, she followed in her father's footsteps, who was a physician, and set up a tent during the battles. There are so many other examples of ladies who played a prominent role and created history through their deeds. So today, ladies and gentlemen, as we turn the pages of our history, we should all leave this session inspired to find our passion, our cause, our purpose of life. Let's search our inner self better, discover our talent, and then work towards it. Truly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make the path easy for us all and bless us with the best in the world and hereafter. Ameen. With this, I thank Professor Al-Hassani for taking time out in his busy schedule. We look forward to seeing you soon. Hope you all have a good evening. Thanks again. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone, for joining in. We were live on Facebook. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining in. We were live on Facebook also, and we have the links available, and you can find us on UMT also. I'm pretty sure Professor Salim Hasmi's Facebook will also have the seminar available. Thank you, Dr. Nashaba, Dr. Hasni, and everyone who joined in. Thank you very much.
We'll take him, Lena.
Thank you, sir, Dr. Hasni.
Okay, thank you very much. All the best. See you.
See you then.
Thank you. Jazakallah. Thank you.